Thank you very much, all the speakers. And we now have the Q&A section. I remind the public that you can continue to ask questions in the Q&A tab also while we are speaking. So I would start. We receive a number of questions. Alyssa, Alyssa and Shani, do you hear us?
Yes, I'm sorry I can't be on camera, but I can hear you perfectly.
That's very good. So I would start with you. There are some people that are kind of curious about the rewildering practices that you have spoken about beyond the life savings function they have. So one person asked whether you know if these FMT rewilding practices are self-administered or professionally offered, and how do they find donors, and what about the medical risks? And this leads also to another questions that is for Shani and Alyssa, but is also open to all the others. So that it refers to study populations in terms of innovations, as Katie Amato has mentioned. So this person don't think that all population are interested in the rewilding. Not all the countries are interested in the rewilding of the gut, while other countries are spending millions on that. So what are your thoughts? Should we refrain from doing research on the microbiome of population we cannot get back to the therapy? Thank you.
I can start, Shani, on this one. So in response to the first question, I think that the important thing for us to remember, and it's very hard because we only had 15 minutes. So I encourage everyone who is watching today to please review our comprehensive article in Nature Microbiology that came out a few years ago. It really covers all of this in great depth, more than we can discuss today. The paper is called Ethical Microbiome Research with Indigenous Communities. In terms of the fecal transplant, these are mostly self-administered. And the high-profile case, you can Google it, and I will allow you to Google it yourself in order to see the indication there of the impacts of doing that. It's not ethical. It does not get passed with IRB approval. And it was a really high-profile case that made it all the way to the front story of Popular Science. And it's been covered repeatedly, both in Science and Nature, as sort of taking this concept of rewilding to the extreme. But what I will say in general about this is the concept is not only inaccurate, but it is also harmful. And a lot of the things that we touched upon in our talk and that were in the review article were also discussed by panelists also. So I'm sure they have a lot to contribute to this. But I will say that even though some of these FMT, not necessarily individual folks, but there are other strategies that involve dietary changes. We talked about increasing the intake of diverse plant fibers and fermented foods. There are also probiotics and prebiotics. And so there are other ways that this concept of quote unquote restoring the microbiome, which is in itself problematic, there are other approaches to doing this. And I know that we may be able to get into a discussion of what some of these species are, but there are target microbial species that folks are talking about. A lot of Lactobacillus, Bifidobacterium, some of the things that you might predict, Bacteroides, Prevotella. A lot of these are associated with plant-rich diets and are meant to break down complex plant fibers. And they're often more abundant in non-industrialized populations. And so this is sort of where these rewilding approaches include. One final thing about the rewilding movement, and we've talked a lot about this, and I know we'll come back to it, is it's not just that some populations want to rewild and some don't. It's about this microbiomania, and it's about this concept of outside of the scientific environment. It's what is all of our research being used to promote? What types of products, what types of interventions are being produced? How much benefit does the community who is providing these samples get from these types of interventions? So it's also sort of the ripple effect and downstream effect of this type of rewilding and these types of approaches, thinking about where those samples started from, that I'd like to also underscore. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Alyssa. And we have a question for Katie Amato. So, Dr. Amato, I agree with you regarding openness in data and authorship, especially as someone who does a lot of fieldwork and contributes data on public databases. However, sometimes I also reuse data from others, and it's not always easy to retrieve information about who collected the samples from the database entries. Should we push databases to add this as a required field? Something like sample collected by X, or should we recognize all authors of the paper originating the dataset?
Thanks. I think that's a great question. I really like that idea of having a collected by kind of column included in open access data. While it would be great to have all authors of a paper be included on subsequent papers, I don't think that's probably sustainable. I think eventually you'll end up with papers that have hundreds and thousands of authors on them, and that may not kind of reflect the credit you want to. So I think that I think acknowledging that paper, citing it clearly, and then also having that collected by category, I think would be really helpful so that people could maybe reach out to that person and just let them know. I think this is difficult because, I was thinking about this, if there could be a way that people were notified when their data was being accessed, or if there was like a really simple acknowledgement, a simple like permission that was given. But I don't think, we necessarily want to be having to click yes on every single request. That could be a lot. But perhaps notifications of data being used and then that column of collected by would be really helpful. Yeah, I think the last thing I wanted to add in is there are situations also where like somebody might use the data and build something else with it, and they maybe cite the people that generated the data effectively, but then somebody else grabs that next product and uses it, and then they don't kind of cite all the way back. So I do think something like that would be useful, although I'm interested if others on the panel have ideas as well.
Thank you, Katie. We pass to another question for Pascale. How can situations that are currently loss win? So loss for the local community, win for the researcher from the developed country. So how are these situations be converted to win-win? Is there a way to regain the trust of the local community? And to this, I would also add again the question that somehow was only partially covered about if whether should we refrain from doing research on the microbiome of the population that we cannot get back in terms of therapy and innovation.
So I think if you have a loss-win situation, something already went wrong. So I always say if trust was lost, it's quite difficult to get it back. I think it's true in any kind of situation. So I think it would need a lot of work to really find trust again. I think what we should do, so shouldn't we work, but I think you can do it by communicating. And I think if you truly have a true collaboration, you can gain trust back, but I think it should be the exception. Now, should we refrain working on microbiomes from people that we can't get back to therapists to? I think there's different questions here. I think, should we work on all the microbiomes across the globe? Yes and no. I think ideally we would need to have knowledge on all the microbiomes across the globe, but only from populations and communities that are also willing to do so. So I think if people want to be included, they should be included. If they don't want to be included for whatever reason, I think that should be respected as well. But I think that basically it shouldn't be really an issue if someone has less income to not basically work on the microbiome, because ideally you would develop something that can then be also deployed in other contexts. If you think about vaccines, there's basically like initiatives to make them accessible for all. So who knows, maybe one can also set up things if there are successful microbiome treatments to set this out afterwards as well, knowing that probably we need to adapt them as well, as would be needed for vaccines. And maybe for Katie, if I may, just an idea could also be as you do for a consortium. So, I mean, if you're in a big consortium, you're often having a consortium signature. So basically you say for the Afribiota investigators for project. So you could maybe just do like a category for the data collectors, and then you're not an actual co-author, but it still shows up on your PubMed list. I don't know. I think with the ideas like that could maybe be a solution.
Yes. Thank you, Pascale. And actually, this question was open to all the panelists. So if any else of you want to give any input, insights on this, it's very much appreciated.
I'm happy to speak if it's okay to answer that question.
Sure, please.
Thank you so much. I think the issue, I really want to agree with everything that was just stated. So I want to +1 all of that, and also underscore an important aspect of this that we haven't talked much about is this idea of consent. So we mentioned very briefly tiered consent. And if you look deeply into the anthropological and social science literature, you can see more about what tiered consent means. But this often requires really iterative work where rather than using a blanket IRB, you are going back to the community every time you want to use these data for something else. And so it goes beyond therapeutic interventions. It goes beyond just the scientific papers, right? What we are gaining from collecting these samples for our careers, all of us on this panel, save Shani, all of us on this panel are benefiting from the work that we're doing, that is collecting samples from a population, whether it be human or, in the case of Katie's work, non-human primates. We are all benefiting in our careers. We're all getting tenure, at least if you're at a US institution, you're getting tenure. We're receiving accolades. This is our livelihood based on this. And so there's some more intangible aspects that we haven't talked about because it's uncomfortable. But benefit sharing goes beyond sharing financial profits that may come from marketing these data into something that's therapeutic. And so, should we be doing this work with these communities? Should we not be doing this work? The horse has left the barn. It's already happening. So yes, if a community wants to participate, they should be able to participate. But the Nagoya Protocol is still very much focused on the relationship between the data collectors from the research group and the nation state. And often with indigenous communities or communities that have been disenfranchised by the nation state, their relationship is already really problematic. And so a lot of these negotiations have to happen at the community level. So that's just what I wanted to throw out there for discussion.
Yeah. Dim, do you want to add something? Yes?
Yes. Yeah, I think a very important aspect to all the time remember is that we're working with people and with their own uncertainties, own desires, own wishes. And I think it's easy to forget that we're working with people when we are pseudonymizing, anonymizing, and numbering the people in the labs, when we are abstracting the stool and the microbes from the people. And I do think, like, when working radically interdisciplinarily, that it's possible to keep the human factor all the time into the picture. Like in anthropology, we continuously ask consent. Is it okay that I join you to this event? Is it okay? It's not a one-time tick of boxes. It's a continuous process, and I think that's indeed what I would like to emphasize, and that is part of keeping the human being in view. I mean, especially with the human microbiome work, of course.
Thank you. We now have a couple of questions for you, Wim. So, which do you think is the major obstacle against radical interdisciplinary collaboration? And can we create more opportunities and financial resources to overcome the European North American bias and expand the research to include other cultures and understudied populations?
Yeah, those are very big questions, and I'm grateful for receiving them. I mean, interdisciplinarity, what we are now trying to do in our project Eat Well, is not easy. We are all having our own specific scientific worldviews, our language, concepts. So the way we look at things, approach things. So all this requires a lot of time and effort to be working together on finding a shared understanding, at least to a certain extent possible. And for that, you also need funding to have that time, which is still an issue, and especially also when looking at radical interdisciplinary funding streams. A lot of funding streams are very disciplinary oriented. So that's something to work for at the same time, to push for more interdisciplinary funding possibilities and also structures in academia. But we can start that work ourselves by gradually making connections and using our existing project to tie a more interdisciplinary venture to the project. That's like what we do in E12, establishing now the work in Bhutan. And yeah, that's where I think where we can start, and at the same time try to push for these new avenues and structures and show how this can work and benefit.
Thanks. Wim. We make a step back now to the question of the innovation, because from the public, a number of people are asking for Shani perspective on that. So if this type of research should be done, and if microbiome research should be performed in places where therapies will take longer to be implemented. So Shani, if you want to share some of your thoughts too, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for these incredible questions. Yeah, as I say through our slides that innovations concern about this kind of research, which most of the researchers doing, especially for these indigenous people like Hadza. Yeah, first of all, we have a number of different aspects. People come up with different populations for what the population has as people they have, and also even those researchers with the coming to do the research concern about these people. For my overview, what I was noticing is these people, they're not understanding exactly what's going on, especially for this microbiome. Some of them, they just feel like because there's something people they are like give them like a gift and other stuff, it's like they corrupt their mindset, and then after those people taking the samples of those things, they go away and make it in a way that it's not ethical, like using that samples like to advertising the businesses and other stuff, which sometimes it bring the complaining to communities that why people taking the samples and use that samples at the at the business income, to advertise, to advertise the Hadza in a way that probably they're going to increase population of tourists through different companies, and also advertise certain of the product that these foods came from the Hadza, which is not their concept as well. So to innovate all those things, it is better when scholars or people who come in to do some professionalities concerned about these indigenous people. Most of them don't understand completely what's the meaning of the academic, what's the meaning of the education, what the meaning of everything, what the meaning of the researchers. They just contribute the data, and then after final few days, few years, they hear out from other people that you guys, somebody say these certain papers, somebody using you as items of the businesses for his own stuff. So I think it's better for most of the scholars, my view, researchers, to have an incredible and very transparent concept when you come to asking for consent during this kind of the research you are going to conduct within these people. First of all, you can ask them politely, and what's the impact of that research you are going to do, and what's the impact which is bringing this world, not by using them in terms of the advertisement for the business. Maybe you can get more clients, that you can use academically and let the world to help to get help from that information or from that paper you're going to prepare. And also that good things is at least to bring back some informations, for what you're collecting, because the people, they want to know, they have so much excitement, so much waiting to know that what's going on, why all the data we don't know what's going on, because somebody tell me I have a bacteria. My fear is that maybe those are dangerous bacteria probably going to affect me one day. I'm going to die, because what I understand, bacteria is a dangerous things. How come I have 1,000 of bacteria in my stomach and I'm still surviving? And people say that this bacteria, they're good, this bacteria is these, but there's confusions. Some people come out with another reasons, and they say that people taking advantage of that bacteria you have it for internal business. Maybe to do business with bring us more clients within the land of the Hadza for the tourist businesses, or maybe to start a business somewhere using the name of the Hadza to branding that product. We sometimes nowadays, most of us, we are shocking for that. That's why we need to have a good strategy for this, and have a very disciplined researchers who they really want to give good information to the universities where they are teaching the student, and also to help us, because as also we need to be educated. We need to know what people are doing. Yeah, there's another question. I think I didn't hear very well about populations. I don't know my sister Alyssa if she already answered that questions. I think the population concerned about let's deal with my people Hadza, because I don't know about any others people. Yeah, in terms of population, I think how we're gonna do to know the populations of these remaining indigenous people who are still living in a way that most of the people we already move on with the new kind of the life. There is no any research yet to be done, especially know exactly numbers of the Hadza, how many are they? Because I did remember like a few years ago when I started working with the different researchers, there are one of the researchers, he tried to do the population of Hadza, but unfortunately I think it's not like exactly a population of Hadza to know that how many are we. And we are just thinking maybe years coming, I with Alyssa and any others researchers, we're going to do such kind of research, and also going to be helpful to inform the government, because there is these things. There's a lot of loss from the hazards nowadays happens, especially for different challenges which we've been facing from our environment. So the exactly populations of the hazard they're becoming very hectic, very difficult to understand. Because for my research here in Mangola, it's like entire Mangola there are like 300 hazard. Only they living in a village and some of them living in a bush. So you see probably the number of the hazards are decreasing day to day. I don't know what's the cause, what's the matter, what happens, but I think this is one thing about them. Most of the researchers or scholars, I think we need them to consider it as a very important thing, because these people, they're in danger to compare with any other community all over the world, because the population every day that decrease because of challenges. So I think from that, I think everybody, you get my point. I think you understand what I'm saying. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shani. And we proceed to other questions in wrapping up. There are a number of questions on collaborations, and we cannot address all of them today, but this is a good sign for the interest this community have for this kind of topic. So it can be a good prompt for organizing a second round, a second session on these topics. So, for example, there is a question about, so someone asked, as it is, a more unethical labs might publish more high impact papers by exploiting vulnerable population. Is there are any movements in publishing companies or funding agency to prevent this? This question is open to all panelists, but maybe Katie had something to address.
I just was going to say, I think this is a really good point, and I have tried to make an effort when I'm a reviewer lately to talk about if I think there are ethical issues that weren't addressed in a paper. And I think there are some journals that are doing a good job of this, and I think it kind of depends on the editor and kind of where their focus is. I think there are other journals that are not doing as great a job as this. I have a personal experience where I was asked to review for a very high impact paper, and it seemed to me like there was some biopiracy happening. And this was, somebody was asking about non-human samples, and this was animals, and it was people were going around the world collecting samples with help of collaborators. They were offering to pay the collaborators a small sum of money to help them find the animals. They get the data. And I had heard about this kind of behind the scenes. And then when it went to get published, none of those people were on the author list. And the data were not going to be made available. And in fact, were associated with a startup business. And so I had some pretty strong concerns about this and raised them in the review, but that got ignored and the paper got published. So I think we as a community could do a better job of kind of demanding that sort of attention by reviewers, by editors and by granting institutions, because I think this is a big issue.
Thank you very much. I think that as it is clear, ethics and social justice it cannot just be covered by legal issues or informed consent or other documents, but is really a set of relationship that should be nourished through the time across disciplines and in different communities. So I thank all the speakers today for being with us, and all of you for being with us as well. We will continue, and in 5 minutes, there will be the selected talk. So enjoy the break and see you soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.